now that Mark is here, why don't we get underway? I'm Adam Rosenberg. I am the technical host and one of the founders of Excelsior NYC. And I would like to introduce our master of ceremonies for the event, Andrew Laidlaw, who will do further introductions. Thank you, everybody, for coming.
Mark, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Andrew.
We have a few people here who are a combination of founding members of Excelsior and some of the people who have gotten involved since, people who have been involved with the town halls we've been organizing, with some of our community outreach. So we're very excited to have you here. Would you like to start out just by sharing some of your vision for how you'd like to see your prospective term as Manhattan Borough President unfold?
I would love to. Thank you, Adam. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you to my dear friend, Adam Herbst, who I see here. I know he's multitasking at this hour. And it's always wonderful to see the great Shelley Fine, who has done so much for this community over decades, for the Jewish community, for all of the residents of the Upper West Side. So Shelley, thank you for your leadership and your friendship. And I'm pleased to speak to all of you here at Excelsior at a very difficult moment for our community, for New York City, for the Upper West Side, for the Jewish community. And I'm running for borough president to take on these challenges: the public health crisis, the economic shock, which has disproportionately impacted small business. And I'm also running to make our communities better, to work on quality of life, and so that we have safe, well-maintained, clean neighborhoods across the great borough of Manhattan, including, of course, on the Upper West Side. And I'm acutely aware of the profound pain and fear that has been created by a wave of anti-Semitic attacks and other hate crimes that are impacting our community. I want to talk about all of it. Just a little bit on my background before we get into some of those current policies. I actually studied physics in college and went on to become a math and science teacher in the South Bronx. And went on to start a nonprofit in Northern Manhattan, a community development credit union called Neighborhood Trust, which has made thousands of small loans to families and small businesses uptown, helping them buy their first home computer, start a home-based business by buying inventory and equipment, etc. Repayment rate's 98%, an incredible testament to the spirit of uptown and to the power of giving people an opportunity. And that's the base that really allowed me to win election now twice in the wonderful 7th Council District, which is just to the north of some of you. A few of you might be in my district. It starts at 96th Street on the west side and goes up through Morningside Heights, West Harlem, and into Washington Heights, where I live with my family, our wife and our 2 boys. We live in Southern Washington Heights. Was pleased to chair the Parks Committee my first term. In that capacity, really fought to get more gardeners, maintenance workers, PEP officers, park rangers to help ensure that all parks are well maintained, not just Central Park, which is doing great with its own fundraising, but also smaller parks around the West Side, Manhattan and beyond. I had the honor of chairing the Jewish Caucus my first term and presided over what had been the largest number of Jewish members in the city council, 14 at the time. I think we're down by 1 or 2 right now. And I focused on everything from fighting anti-Semitism, securing funding for Jewish social service agencies, standing up for Israel. I led a delegation trip to Israel where we had 14 council members on the trip, mostly non-Jewish, by the way, to really build understanding of the country and the region. And we faced a bitter protest, a very ugly protest in the council chamber about that trip, in which words and imagery of the Holocaust were invoked disgustingly. And I will say that while I've been in the council, there have been many delegation trips to other countries, places like China, Turkey, Russia. I haven't been on those trips, but my colleagues have, and that's fine. None of them have been protested. No protests for any of those trips to any of those countries. Only Israel, is in for that kind of hostile attack. And so when DSA gave a questionnaire for my race and other races this year that had a question on it saying, will you commit to not visiting Israel? I denounced it immediately and refused to even participate in their endorsement process because of that question. I have family in Israel. It would be absurd to think that I wouldn't visit them. And again, only one country out of the 200 countries on earth was singled out for that kind of question, which is clearly anti-Semitic. This term I'm chairing the health committee. In that capacity, I've been putting my heart and soul into fighting this pandemic and standing up for science and equity and clear communication and compassion in the city's response. And I've taken on everyone I've had to, whether it was the Trump White House or the mayor or the governor at various points. And I've got the scars to prove it. But I'm proud of what I've stood up for and continue to stand up for as we make great progress in the pandemic and face challenges ahead. And I'm really running for borough president now to continue those fights on behalf of my leadership in public health, on behalf of affordable housing, on behalf of really tackling the homeless crisis, finally, on behalf of safe and open and well-maintained green space. And I'd love to talk with all of you about that. I would love to hear your questions, your concerns, and what you want me to fight for as your next borough president. So I think I'm going to turn it back to you. Would that be Andrew or Adam? I'm not sure. But either one of you, please take it away.
I also just want to extend, our apologies on behalf of Adam Herbst, who really wanted to be here, but of course, Andrew Cuomo waits for no one.
Indeed.
But speaking of that, the borough president is a complicated role. It's not a role that has very well-defined powers. And so I guess the first question is just, how do you want to use the role, and how do you see yourself using the role to advance your favored policy proposals and initiatives?
It's a very important role at any time, and more so now because of the crisis we're facing. There are four major powers over land use, which is zoning, what you can build where, preservation, et cetera. That's probably the most significant and most well-known power of the borough president's office. Next, there's appointments. Over 1,000 appointments, that's the actual number, on too many boards and bodies to list entirely, but most prominently community boards, which is our hyper-local government, and which the borough president's office also essentially administers, but also community education councils, the city's pension fund, parks conservancy groups, various cultural and museum institution boards, hospital advisory boards, and many, many others. Next, there's power in the budget, about $50 million a year in capital money for library, schools, parks, and various other public infrastructure. And finally, the ability to introduce legislation in the city council. Not a vote in the council, but the ability to introduce bills. It all adds up to a very powerful platform for putting forth a vision for the future of the borough and organizing to implement it. Whether that is on public health, on affordable housing, on homelessness, on parks and public space. You need a borough president who's going to put forth a vision for our recovery at this very difficult time. And that's the kind of vision I put forth in this campaign and the kind of leadership I will provide as borough president.
You mentioned that appointments are one of the big roles that the borough president fills. And I don't know that there's anyone who's happy with the composition of the community boards. And I think that certainly you've got a lot of people on here who don't have a whole lot of faith in the composition of Community Board 7, and a lot of people from very different backgrounds on the Upper West Side who also don't have a lot of faith in the composition of Community Board 7, particularly NYCHA residents. And so can you speak to your approach to addressing people's concerns about the makeups of the community boards and how you're going to look at the choices that you make for who goes on the boards?
boards have to reflect the diversity of their neighborhoods, the diversity of perspective and life experience, and we have to do better. And of course, that is in part racial diversity, and I'm very proud of the diversity of my appointments to community boards 7, 9, and 12. But it's also many other factors. We need more small business owners represented on the boards. We need more young people represented on boards. We need more NYCHA residents. We need more people with disabilities. There's a wide variety of perspectives that must be represented. And as borough president, I'm going to work to achieve that goal, not just by stating it, but by actively recruiting so that people know we need their leadership. And I want boards to be open and transparent and accessible. I'd like to see them continue with a virtual option, even if they return to in person, so that people who have busy schedules can still be part of meetings, even if they can't be there in person. I want to make sure that we have better early notification of resolutions. I found that sometimes resolutions appear unannounced as a committee meeting is underway, and the community then doesn't have a time to engage or respond or offer input until it's a fait accompli. And I do want to offer better advanced notification and transparency on things like resolutions. And I'm open to the thoughts of you or anyone in the group on how we can make sure that community boards are open and transparent and have a diversity of perspectives. I'm certainly committed to those goals and would welcome your input on the best way to make it happen.
Thanks. Well, as a follow-up to that, as someone who was elected on the Upper West Side, do you have a particular idea of what kind of representation you think is specifically lacking on CB7, and who you'd like to see added to CB7?
Not ready to name names. So if you got an application pending, Andrew, let's talk. But I don't think I can get specific other than saying that no segment of the community should feel unrepresented. No segment of the community should feel like they don't have a voice on the community board. No segment of the community should feel locked out or that they can't get information. It's just the stakes are too high. It's just too important. And you have my commitment to make sure that your perspective and every perspective is well represented. And if you have specific suggestions on up and coming leaders or established leaders that you like on the board, tell me. It's obviously we're just finished this year's appointment process, but the next one starts not too far in the future. So I would welcome your input on specific advice on people we should appoint.
You might want to talk to Cynthia Tibbs about that, who I see just joined us.
Hi, Cynthia. How are you?
Cynthia, you're muted. Cynthia, you're still on mute.
Okay, is that better?
We hear you now. Hi, Cynthia.
Hi, Mark. I do have a quick question.
Please.
As far as the community boards go, if you were to become Manhattan Borough President, would your office commit to having a representative that would monitor, whether it be on Zoom or in person, all meetings that transpire to make sure that CB7 is adhering to the rules of their bylaws?
Absolutely. And Cynthia, first, let me thank you for your leadership for the West Side, for NYCHA residents, specifically in the West Side urban renewal area at a very challenging time. And I've so appreciated your voice and your leadership. So I want to thank you for that. I also identify public housing residents as the kind of voices that we need more of on community boards.
And that was going to be my next statement. Very often, we are cast aside when it comes to the application process in favor of other people that have been in the community for less amount of years than ourselves. Myself have been refused, and I've been here since birth, where others have gotten in.
I totally agree, Cynthia, that we need more NYCHA residents, NYCHA leaders represented on community boards throughout the borough. It's one of the top areas of diversity that I'm focused on. So you have my commitment on that as well.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Cynthia. Great to see you.
Okay.
So, Mark, are there any particular changes that you would see from the direction that the borough president's office, the Manhattan Borough President's Office, has taken over the last 8 years under Gail Brewer?
Well, look, I can only say great things about Gail. I would be, the next borough president will be taking office at a different time. The challenges the city was going to faces now in 2021 are different from those the city faced the last time we had an open elections season, which was 2013. The challenges of that small businesses face are more acute today than they were 8 years ago. The challenge of homelessness is more acute today than it was 8 years ago. Obviously, everything related to the pandemic and public health, more acute today than it was 8 years ago. I'll just say a quick word on those things. I am alarmed at the loss of small business in our community on the west side. The vacancy rate was already high pre-pandemic, and now it's only gotten painfully worse. And many of the remaining small businesses are in a precarious position. The city has to be a partner, not an obstacle. The city, I'm going to push for a reconsideration of all fines and fees. The city should not use small businesses as a cash register. The purpose of fines and fees should be to protect, the purpose of inspections should be to impact and protect health and safety of the public and of staff. If we can do that without levying a fine, that's a victory. So let's make it first and foremost about protecting health and safety and avoid fees wherever possible. There's a tax called the commercial rent tax, which only applies in Manhattan, none of the other 5 boroughs, and only applies south of 96th Street. And it's a major burden on a lot of small businesses south of 96th Street. It's not fair, and it should be eliminated. At a minimum, it should be rolled back for small and mid-sized businesses like supermarkets, but ideally it would be eliminated. And I'm also doing work on expanding access to credit for small businesses and other things we can do to support them. On the issue of homelessness, I mean, this has just been years of failed policy. We have to do much better on mental health programming, which under the current administration has been too focused on things like depression and anxiety, which is important to address, but not enough resources into things like more severe psychiatric conditions like schizophrenia. And the way outreach runs right now is basically someone goes after them, they ask, would you like shelter? If they say no, they say, would you like social services? If they say no, they just move on. And we need teams that actually invest in building relationships that can provide services on the spot, including psychiatric services, and that build a relationship to build trust to bring people in off the street into shelter. Next, we need to do much better on addiction treatment and get beyond only using methadone clinics as the only tool. There's an exciting emerging class of treatments that I've been working on as chair of the health committee, medical alternative treatments like buprenorphine that allow you to get treated with a monthly prescription given in a doctor's office. They don't require you going to a methadone clinic every day. And so it's a great solution for a lot of people. If God forbid I had a family member who had opioid addiction, I would want them in one of these medical alternative treatments like buprenorphine. The city's not done enough to make this available to enough people. Next, the homeless shelters, because some of them are poorly run and dangerous. There are people who are on the street because they feel less unsafe on the street than they do in the shelter. We have to improve the shelters to make them better run safer, more social services. The ultimate solution to homelessness is supportive housing, as Shelley knows better than anybody. And there's not enough of it. I am so proud of a project that is 99% close to completion on 108th Street in my district between Amsterdam and Columbus. Shelley knows it because he's on the board of the West Side Federation for Senior and Supportive Housing, aka Wishfish, which is the main nonprofit entity developing and going to run it. It's 200 units, 60% supportive housing, 40% traditional family affordable housing. It's going to be amazing. Has a 5,000-foot clinic on the ground floor. There's going to be 24-hour mental health services, substance abuse treatment services, job training services in the building. It's going to bring people in off the street, and it's proven to keep people off the street to prevent recidivism to homelessness. That's the kind of thing I want much more of, and we'll fight for. Finally, on the COVID stuff, we can talk to if you want, just very, very briefly. I'm really pleased with our progress in vaccination. Over 50% of the city, 53% have gotten their first dose. But I'm also really worried that vaccination has stalled out, and that if we don't vaccinate the second half of the city, that we'll be vulnerable to another wave in the fall. I'm happy to talk about that and what it will take and the impact of the variants, et cetera. What that means for school reopenings, for the reopening of arts institutions, et cetera, if you'd like to. But that clearly will be a priority of mine as borough president. So that was a long answer, but I had a lot of ground to cover there. Thank you, Andrew.
That's good. And it's great to hear that you're planning and that you're ready.
Absolutely.
I'd love to open it up to questions from everyone. If you could direct message me just to let me know that you have a question so we can do it in an orderly fashion. Mark, you'll get your first question from Rabbi Sherman.
Hi, Mark. Thank you very much for joining us. It's really a pleasure to meet with you, and I've heard great things, and we're reading up about you and looking forward very much to your candidacy. One of the questions I was interested in, and you touched upon a little bit in regards to seniors, was our synagogue on 76th Street between Columbus and Amsterdam, West Side Institutional Synagogue, houses JASA. Obviously, JASA has been closed or really reduced really to just meal distribution, but God willing, once JASA returns, hopefully in August, September, their plan is to have back to indoor and real programming from approximately 9 and 12:30. I personally am very invested in JASA, both as I have members of my synagogue who use it and benefit from it, as well as the fact that it's an important tenet to our synagogue's lifeblood financially, as they pay us monthly rent. And thank God they've been able to pay through the pandemic, even though they haven't really used us. And my question is JASA and similar programming, where does that fit in with your agenda, specifically vis-a-vis the elderly? And I'm also concerned with the economic toll, specifically to the seniors of the community that now may need JASA, even though they may not have needed it beforehand, but the reduced, the cheaper meals, et cetera. Just where does JASA fit into your programming and to where your budget?
Well, thank you, Rabbi Sherman, and West Side Institutionals as a pillar of life, of Jewish life and more on the Upper West Side. And so grateful for your leadership. And JASA is a wonderful nonprofit working on a really critical priority for me and for the city, services to our seniors. The Upper West Side has an aging population, and we need to do much more to serve them. There are some urgent needs for those who are homebound in this pandemic to bring vaccination to their apartments. We're much better at vaccinating homebound seniors. You may have some in your congregation even, but I know that Shelley Fine has done an enormous amount of work with homebound seniors, Jewish and otherwise, on the West Side, including food access, which other than vaccination would be the next most important priority. We've had a real challenge forcing the administration to offer kosher options in home and food delivery for those seniors who are at home. We've made some progress on that. It shouldn't have to be such a fight. It's something that's very front of mind for me. We have senior centers now, which have been closed for a year and 3-4 months. That has had a huge emotional toll on seniors, and probably even a physical toll. because the need for social contact is proven to be a factor in health. And I have been agitating for months with Gail Brewer to reopen senior centers for in-person service. And I'm thrilled that starting on the 14th of, which I guess is next Monday, senior centers are going to allow to reopen for limited in-person services. This is great news. We need to do more to support this sector. We need more caseworkers in senior centers and more caseworkers that can do home visits. This is something that JASA does and does well, but they need more money for that. And there's a particular need for intensive support for Holocaust survivors. One of the things I'm most proud of that we launched during my term as chair of the Jewish Caucus in the City Council is a funding initiative that is known as the Elie Wiesel Holocaust Survivors Initiative. We had his son, Elisha Wiesel, with us to rename the initiative for his father of blessed memory. And it provides now $4 million a year to senior serving nonprofits to offer intensive assistance to Holocaust survivors, of which there are many on the West Side, more than I think the general population realizes. So I'm very committed to nonprofits like JASA. This is on the line in the budget that we're negotiating right now. The city approves its budget in late June. So we're kind of in the home stretch on that. And I'm pushing very hard for various initiatives that would help provide funding for JASA and other senior serving nonprofits in the Jewish world and more broadly. Thank you so much, Rabbi, for your question.
Thank you very much.
We've got a question now from Erica Gerson. Erica.
You got me right before I stepped in the elevator. Okay. Thanks, guys. Hi, Mark. We met on the corner of 19th Street the other day.
We sure did.
I was wondering, Dr. Ruth. Nice to see you. So some will be more quick comment form because I do support your candidacy. I actually got the donation in before the matching deadline.
Yay, thank you.
I think you're welcome. I think, you're the common sense way to go. So when you asked about what we hope you'll focus on when you are elected, I wanted to just give you a few thoughts. One is I saw that you're supportive of the legalization of marijuana, which I think is kind of a wave that we can't stop at this point. But as a member of the health community, I think you'll agree that there are real health threats to those smoke, to secondhand, particularly. I know there have been blood draws on kids, particularly in public housing, and like a third of them are coming back with exposure to marijuana. The stuff is not the same stuff that we grew up with. And if you look up scromiting, I don't know if you're familiar with that, screaming and vomiting, there really are major medical issues that come from marijuana. So I hope that you'll put that on your radar. I think it was one of the great accomplishments that we got rid of smoking in New York, and it seems like a step backward that we're bringing it back. And here on the Upper West Side, when you walk children to school in the morning, you often encounter clouds of smoke. So I hope we start thinking about what we're doing about that. Also, you mentioned the CEC, the education committees, right. And my question on that one is, the question on that one is, you talk a lot about segregation, and of course, segregation when it's forced is a bad thing. But there are also a particular community and be surrounded by people that they feel familiar with, whether it's the Jewish community being together, whether it's Asians in Chinatown or Hispanics in Spanish Harlem, making sure that every community has access to excellence. And the means to achieve that excellence and do it in a place that's local. There's a lot of parents that don't want to home, and so they're not willing to go to a G&T program because it's not near their home and near their friends. So I hope that you'll be supportive of candidates who are not in favor of this new wave, which is eliminating all merit-based programs, merit-based admissions, and G&T. And the final thing I'll say is, talking to local voters, which I've been doing a whole lot of, one of the biggest challenges is for our seniors to afford the Upper West Side. As someone who grew up here 42 years on the Upper West Side, I know that it's those seniors who built the Upper West Side and transformed it into the safe and vibrant neighborhood that it is. And many of them are overburdened with monthly payments. Even if they're owners, they can't afford the additional taxes. And some of them just can't afford on their fixed income to do the rent. And I know that we have some senior housing that's come into the neighborhood, but the current law says that only 50% can be set aside for the local community. I'm wondering if that's something that can be addressed and if the borough president would have any power there. So I guess I'll leave that one as my question.
So I could you just repeat the third point, the last point you said?
Point is that currently
We're kind of losing your connection.
affordable housing.
Erica,
Only if they're Upper West Side seniors who find them community where you're. No.
So I think the third point was about affordable housing for seniors, but Andrew, did I get that right?
It was, can you hear me? It's the
It was about,
60%
the affordability of staying in their longtime neighborhoods. So it's a combination of housing and taxes.
And what was the 50% thing, Erica?
Can we increase, right now, only 50% is set aside for local preference, and I don't know why that should be.
Right. Okay, got it.
So,
Okay.
so do you have power at all, and how could we increase that so people don't get pushed out?
Yes, okay, so we'll talk about senior housing and local preference. We'll talk about academic screening. And forgive me, your first point was?
It was marijuana, being
right,
thoughtful
okay,
about the
great.
health
So,
risks.
excellent, okay. Yes, New York State has passed legislation joining now, I think, over 24 other states to legalize marijuana. But let me just say what it is and isn't. First of all, it's a multi-year phase-in, and very little has changed as of yet. It does not and will not legalize illicit sale of marijuana. It does not and will not change the fact that it is not legal to consume marijuana or tobacco or vaping products in a variety of venues in New York City, ranging from restaurants, indoor businesses, public parks, a growing number of housing establishments, including public housing, where the rules prohibit both tobacco smoking and marijuana smoking, and that is not going to change and will not change. What the law will allow is the creation of heavily regulated and importantly taxed dispensaries, where it will be legal to purchase. This is a model now fairly well established in other states like Massachusetts, and it means that the city and the state will get hundreds of millions of dollars in tax revenue, and we hope that it means we'll end the illicit sale of marijuana on the street, because it'll be replaced by these regulated dispensaries. But that doesn't mean that we can let our guard down, particularly for young people, where there is evidence that marijuana impacts the development of adolescents. And the law doesn't change the fact, the law would establish a minimum age of 21, joining tobacco and alcohol. And for all three of these substances, it's really critical that we do everything we can to prevent the use by people under 21 through first enforcing the law around sale to no one under 21. We know that can be circumvented, as it is with tobacco and alcohol all the time, but we need education as well and other efforts to prevent young people from using these new substances. So moving on to academic screening, I taught, I'm not sure if I mentioned, I did it early on, I taught in the Bronx at a junior high school, math and science. I had 36 kids on average in every one of my middle school classes. And there were classes like, I had a 7th grade math class where I had some kids who were doing algebra and some kids who were working on their times tables in the same room. It was almost impossible for me as a teacher to give every student along that spectrum the kind of education that they needed commensurate with their abilities. So I understand the challenge of that kind of educational setup. I want every kid to have a great education, pushing themselves to the maximum of their ability. And that's why I have not called for the end of all academic screening. I think that at younger ages, probably we've over-relied on it. But I would actually like to add G&T programs where they're underrepresented in communities of color, such as Uptown Manhattan and other parts of the outer boroughs. And as for your question on senior housing, I mean, that really is the segment of the city that is in danger of being pushed out because so many are on fixed incomes or people are aging into senior status. Now, the specific thing you mentioned is that on city-funded affordable housing, including the one that I mentioned that I'm very proud of opening on 108th Street, the rule is that there's a set aside for 50% of the units for people who live in the community board. So in that project I mentioned on 108th Street, it'll be people in CV7, which is all the way down to Columbus Circle. That set aside alone is being challenged in court. And it's being challenged on the grounds that it leads to segregation because it reinforces existing housing patterns. We don't need to talk here about the merits of that. But I'll just say that to expand it beyond 50%, I think is a heavy lift when I think the city is on defense right now just to preserve that 50%. That doesn't mean you can't have housing which is 100% set aside for seniors. Now that doesn't stipulate what neighborhood they're from. But I mean, West Side Federation for Senior Supportive Housing is kind of predicated on that model. And so we do need more dedicated senior affordable housing, which would help everyone in the city, whatever neighborhood they're from. So a few thoughts on that, and I appreciate all those great questions.
Okay, Shelley, you're up. You're on mute, Shelley.
I just want to start to say I evaluate candidates not only on what they promise to do, which are more or less convincing depending on who you're listening to, but what they've done. And I want to point out one thing about how Mark has responded in the past year that to me made it clear that there was no other choice. I texted him because the city was providing home-cooked meals, 9 at a time. Every 4th day, they'd be renewed for a month. And kosher meals were going to be included. And that sounded great. But the city said, in their wisdom, that senior centers had to sign up people. Well, the senior centers were closed. And the social workers who were still employed, much reduced number, were in contact with hundreds of seniors that they had to look after day by day. They didn't have days to go for training of putting information in a portal because it has to be done by social workers who work the seniors, senior centers. 2 minutes after I texted Mark, I got a call from his chief of staff who said, what do we need to do? And I think there was a full month, it could have been more in the end, where she was dedicated. I had an Excel sheet of 221 households, almost all seniors on the West Side, most who wanted kosher food, but non-Jews who wanted kosher food because they figured, why not? It's good food. And together with someone assisting Gail Brewer's Borough President's office, the two of them worked for a month and got everyone signed up, which brought a month of meals to those people, and then they had to be renewed, and then eventually the senior or person in the household could then continue by recertifying with a simple phone call. To me, that's the timing, 2 minutes. He apparently understood that people were hungry, that these were people not only in homebound because of the pandemic, but many of them would have had the difficulty anyway. And the idea, not questioning that maybe people don't need it. Well, you never know what people need, okay? But it was mainly seniors and some in his district, some for further loads on the West Side. started receiving these meals. To me, it wouldn't have happened otherwise, okay? And it happened almost immediately. And so people were so relieved and so thankful. And I tried telling as many as I could at the time where the help came from. But I have to say it publicly because this is extraordinary from my perspective and tells me what Mark is all about, what his priorities are, and the fact that he will act and use the resources available for the people in our community. I can tell you a lot of other things he did. He funded the only inclusive playground in the city, maybe in the country, in our community. He passed a law. I've never gone onto the steps of City Hall before to support anybody in doing anything. But he passed a law, which was his, I'll give Vanessa a little credit, okay? But he pushed for it and pushed the mayor and pushed everybody to get legal help for low-income residents who are facing eviction. When you're facing a wealthy and resourced, highly resourced owner and managers against poor people who can't afford that representation, or if they get it, it was less than adequate. I can go on to so many things. What he did during the health, he was the only one you could trust during the pandemic in terms of, he was the chair of the health committee, having a million meetings and communicating to the community what was really happening, and it was trustworthy. So there are just so many good reasons why I feel that we must support him. I want to ask him a simple question, okay? To me, the most egregious part of the defund police movement in New York has been the defunding of undercover police. Could you comment on that? And what would you do in your position? You won't be on the city council then, but you'll have influence over 12 city council people and the pulpit of the borough president of Manhattan.
Well, Shelley, my goodness, thank you for everything you just said. It really means a lot to me.
Thank you for everything you did.
And thank you for your leadership. Truly extraordinary. And I mentioned, I think earlier on in my remarks that I am worried about public safety issues in the borough of Manhattan. And that includes gun crimes as well. And I am very open about saying that we need to attack this challenge with a multi-front strategy, leaving no tools on the table, and that effective and fair policing is part of the solution. That might sound like a banal statement, but not everyone will say that. And of course, we also have to double down on the kinds of social services which make communities safer. Again, we have to move forward on every front. I'm extremely concerned about the flow of illegal guns into Manhattan, coming from southern states, turning basically I-95 into what people have dubbed the Iron Highway. And the city is going to have to do much better at investigating and solving gun crimes. The clearance rate is far too low. We have to address this. My district, particularly in the Manhattan Valley area, around 104th Street, has been the scene of a number of extremely disturbing shooting incidents just in the last month or two. And so this is very personal to me. So I consider this a top priority. We have to address public safety more broadly. We have to address gun crimes specifically, and we need every tool at our disposal deployed to this effort. So thank you so much, Shelley.
Thank you.
Mark, we are coming up on the end of our time. So I just want to say thank you so much for making yourself available for this. And this is the start of a conversation.
Thank you, Andrew. Can I just ask, is Sarah Morrstein related to Rabbi Morrstein? Are you the Rebetson? Oh, he is amazing. I love him. Will you please send him my regards?
I will definitely do that. And we're really looking forward to a safer city where everybody wants to come to shul and go to the schools here. We can't afford any more problems. It's really serious. A lot of people are telling me they still want to leave, and I'm very worried.
We can't let that happen. We cannot let this be a place that anyone wants to leave. And we have to make this a healthy, strong, vibrant, safe, wonderful city. And so that people want to live here, they want to come to work here, they want to visit here, they want to see a show here.
We're ready to help. We're ready to help.
So, well, please give the rabbi my regards.
I'll do that.
And it's an honor to have you.
Thank you so much.
Chat. Sorry, Andrew, if you just wanted to quickly. I could offer some closing statements if you want, or
well, we really are coming up on time. So I do just want to say, this is the start of a conversation, and obviously you've got a few fans in the room.
Well, I appreciate that. If you'll just allow me to say that we have Gabby on my team. So Gabby, could you just post a link for folks if they want to get involved? Is that okay to do, Andrew, or is that not?
Oh, of course.
Okay, great. So
absolutely, you can email it out to everyone afterwards.
We are 14 days out from this election, and actually early voting starts on unfortunately it's Shabbat, but it starts on Saturday, but it does go for 10 days. So you have plenty of options. It's every single day starting on Saturday for 10 days. You have early voting, and then the main event itself is on Tuesday, June 22nd. I need your help. I need your help to spread the word. I feel that people are paying attention, if anything, to the mayor's race, if that, but that down ballot at the level of borough president, it's kind of not really on their radar. And so it's really impactful when people hear from a friend or a family member or a neighbor or the person they sit next to at shul, hey, there's this guy Levine, he's running for borough president. Just put him number one. So I really need you to WhatsApp everybody and to spread the word. And if you're willing to actually volunteer in a formal way, we need you at many, many, many great roles that you can do from the comfort of your own home. Some people like to be out in the street. Some people want to be involved in helping us staff poll sites when early voting and election day starts. So what Gabby has just done is put a link in the chat, and I'm actually going to put right now my cell number in the chat. So
That's good.
so that if you want to reach me on an issue in the community, more importantly, but also if you want to just connect to me about the campaign in the next 14 days, you're going to have no worry that you're not going to have an open door. So I just put my cell in the chat for anyone who wants to cut and paste that. Thank you, Excelsior. Congrats on what you're building. Congrats on this forum for important policy discussions, for raising new issues and new perspectives. I congratulate you. I am so honored to have had this hour with you. Shout out to my brother, Adam Herbst. And thank you to everyone who's been part of this incredible conversation.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you. We
Bravo.
really enjoyed it.
Thank you so much.
Really enjoyed it. Thank you. We'll be.
Be well, guys. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for attending. Thank you, Andrew, for moderating.
Thanks a lot, guys.